Welcome to the From the Core Workbook Series podcast, where we go through the From the Core Workbook Series, which is a step-by-step guide for those of you needing and wanting to rebuild your lives from the core. My name is Cordelia Yoakum. Everyone calls me Core. You're welcome to call me Core or Cordelia. I am the author of From the Core, A Spiritual Journey of Losing Everything and Finding Hope, which is my personal journey of needing to rebuild my life from the core. From that point, I wrote the From the Core Workbook Series, which is a 1,300-page, 1,295 question, 4-book package and collection through which you actually begin to identify who you are at the core. And it's a step-by-step guide to help you rebuild your life on a firm foundation. I am the author of the From the Core Workbook Series as well, but quite honestly, the real author of the From the Core Workbook Series is you. In this podcast, we're going to go through each workbook and each section in each workbook so that you will not feel alone in this process, because there's a lot of information in here that digs deep and brushes up against things that are sometimes hard to talk about, hard to look at, and I don't want you feeling like you're going through this alone. And number two, you also have the opportunity through the YouTube channel in particular, where you can participate in this journey as a community. Your comments, your stories that you leave in the comment section will inform the conversation that we're going to have going forward. So today, we are going to cover, we're in the very first workbook in the From the Core Workbook Series. By the way, if you don't have this yet, fromthecore.global, you can either get it in workbook form like this, you can get it in a digital file, and you can get just a blank journal, and you can listen to this podcast and just get the same visual and visceral experience in a journal that looks very similar to this, has beautiful photos on the inside, but is blank, and you can write in that journal and just listen to this podcast and do it in that fashion. So there's an experience for every level, whatever level you're at. That's where we want to meet you. Today, we're going to go through From the Core Workbook Series Stage 1, which is Reckoning, which is really where you come to the end of yourself, which is the beginning of God. It's an incredibly powerful moment. If you find yourself where you feel some big event has happened and you are left feeling blank, when you look in the mirror, you don't know who you are. If that's where you are, I've been there before, and let me tell you from the other side, there is nothing more powerful than this adventure that you and I are going to go on together. You do have a core at the very center of your being. It is findable and discoverable, but it is going to require an excavation journey to the core of who you are. And we're going to go on that together. Last time we discussed the difference between labels and identity. If you haven't watched that, I would encourage you to. We discussed the difference between what is a label that we put on ourselves and what is actually our identity. So I used often the example of being a wife or a husband is a label, but sometimes if we lose that label, as in we get a divorce or our spouse dies, we no longer carry that label. And sometimes for some people, that causes a loss of identity. It can be marriage, it can be a job, it can be anything that causes a label to affix to you, and the loss of that causes this big identity crisis. And so we dug deep on the importance of your name, something as very simple as your name as a label that you carry. We talked about what that is and the event or moment that called you out of your name, and identified that as a schism in identity. So we just brushed on that. And today we're going to talk about what exactly is a schism in identity. What does that even mean? And you're going to begin to understand that moment when a schism in identity may have formed in you. I'm super excited about today. I'm so excited about today. And so here we go. The first radical thing that I want to say is not all trauma is traumatic. There is so much in the present zeitgeist about this idea of trauma, this belief that there is an event that took place and that event makes any present or future behavior understandable. For example, people will say things like, of a toddler, let's say, oh, she's acting out because her dad is sick. Or of someone who has a really destructive life, let's say in their early 20s. He's an alcoholic, but his mom left his family as a child. And the response often that we encounter when we say these types of things is, oh, it's like this knowing response, like, oh, that makes sense. And in that way, we sort of excuse or accept the behavior because trauma is at the root. But not all trauma is traumatic. Things happen in people's lives, really horrible things, and sometimes it doesn't result in bad behavior. It doesn't result in a life going totally off the rails. The person maintains integrity with their identity. Yes, something bad happened, something difficult happened, but it's not traumatic. They're not traumatized by it. So I wanted to dig in to why does that happen? Why in life to some people do bad things happen and they're okay with it? They get up, they dust themselves off. And to others, something very slight can happen and it causes them to derail entirely, and it causes such a mark on their psyche that they are not the same moving forward and they never recover themselves. It's a fascinating phenomenon. So in this idea of a schism in identity, let's just back up and say there is an event or an experience that does not negatively impact a person's belief about themselves or their ability to cope. That type of event, experience, or trauma does not form a schism in identity. So I'm going to say that again. An event or experience that does not negatively impact a person's belief about themselves, that's number one, or number two, does not impact their thoughts about their ability to cope, does not form a schism in identity. It's just an event or experience or trauma. Events that, number one, impact a person's belief about themselves, and number two, their ability to cope, creates a schism in identity. A schism in identity results in a loss of a sense of safety, a loss of innocence, and an adoption of guilt and shame and self-blame. That then results in fear becoming embedded in a person's nervous system, perception, and thought patterns. It's now seeped into the actual nervous system of a person's body. And then from that point, there is a deduced perception that one is at fault, resulting in a foundational belief that one is broken, unworthy, and less than. And listen, this is theoretical right now, okay? But we're going to get into actual stories where you can see how this all plays out in a life, including in my own. So let's just recap real quickly. When you have an event or experience that impacts a person's belief about themselves and their ability to cope, you now have a schism in identity. That schism in identity results in a loss of innocence, a loss of a sense of safety, and adoption of guilt and shame. That then results in the sense of fear, and that fear becomes embedded in a person's nervous system, their thoughts and their perceptions, and a deduced perception that one is at fault. So let's just make that a little bit simpler. I'm feeling like that's a little cumbersome, so let's make that a little bit simpler. The schism in identity results in loss of innocence, sense of safety, guilt, and shame, okay? That creates a sense of fear. If you no longer feel safe, you're fearful, and you now feel like you have to do what you can to survive because you're at risk, right? So you lose innocence and you lose a sense of safety. Fear is now a part of your body. It actually takes up residence in your body. This type of schism in identity, this type of trauma happens in the body, and this is how it happens. From that point, once it's in your body and it's now informing your thought process and your perception of things, of yourself and of others and of the world, that results in a foundational belief that you are broken, unworthy, and less than. The schism results in a belief that you are broken, unworthy, and less than, which then distorts a child's foundational core alignment And over time, that child, which may be you, becomes someone drastically different than who that child is by design. When we talk about a schism in identity and we talk about you being out of core alignment, it may have been just something super simple that ticked you out of alignment from who you were intended to be at the very beginning of your life. And that 1 degree of difference played out over time, you become someone drastically different than who you were designed to become. I want to talk about why I say a child. Now, going back to, again, trauma theory, so much of it, and you have heard this, this is not new. This is no news break happening right now in the From the Core Workbook series podcast. A lot of this trauma begins in childhood. And I wanted to know why. Why is it that childhood seems to mark us for life? Jean Piaget, who's a Swiss psychologist and a leader in child development psychology, came up with 4 stages of cognitive development, okay? So that's the development of the mind. The first stage is sensory motor, and that's from 0 to 2, which is basically, the infant, the child, the toddler is exploring senses and movements. And they basically, around 1 year old, realize that things exist when they're out of sight. So, my cookie is still there even if I hid it under the plate, okay? That's sensory motor. The second stage of child development, cognitive development, is pre-operational, which is ages 2 to 7. And that's symbolic thinking. So they use words, images, and pretend play, right? This is when your dollies or your stuffed animals begin talking to you and you pretend play. We all know what that means. The child from 2 to 7 is also pretty egocentric. They see things from their own perspective. They don't have the ability to see things from anyone else's perspective but their own. Stage 3 is called concrete operational stage, and that is from ages 7 to 11. And I'm going to give you multiple bullet points that happen in the concrete operational stage, beginning at age 7. This is where the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for emotional regulation and reasoning, undergoes significant development. It's still immature, but it's undergoing significant development. Around age 7, the child moves from magical thinking to logical thinking. This is where they go from that constant state of play that, everything is possible. Like we said, my dollies, my stuffed animals talk to me, into logical thinking. It's a shift that happens around age 7. Children start also shifting from external regulation to internal regulation, meaning my mom or my dad is responsible for helping me when I'm upset, to I am responsible for managing my own emotions myself. Another bullet point under the concrete operational stage is a child starts understanding cause and effect, rules, fairness, and consequences. If I do X, Y, Z, there will be consequences, okay? They can also see things from another's perspective, and they begin to internalize how others respond and react to them. Something else that happens that's really profound is your memory turns on and self-consciousness is formed. So you know this. Some people out there may have fully formed memories around 4, 5, 6, 7, but most people really start to begin to remember, have long-term memory around the age of 7. So memory turns on. You might remember going out for ice cream, or doing something, playing in a puddle or something like that. You may have a vague memory before then, but generally, deep and lasting memory turns on around 7. And self-consciousness, you're conscious of yourself. At this age, also, the worldview of a child becomes more structured, and what you experience now becomes deeply embedded beliefs. So your memory is on, you have an awareness of self-consciousness, and now you start to think about the world in a way that embeds as deeply held beliefs. From there, you go into the formal operational stage, and this is age 12 plus, where you're able to think abstractly and hypothetically, and you can reason philosophically. So we don't need to go into that any deeper because I want to keep on this age 7. If you talk to people who have had trauma in their lives or experiences that formed them and their beliefs and their perceptions about themselves, they will often say age 7 is when that began. At age 7, children start making a sense of their reality in a way that still affects them today. So I want to quickly break down this idea of self-consciousness. What is self-conscious? What does that mean? And it just means to be overly aware of oneself. If you look at the etymology of self-conscious, self is one's own person, and consciousness is to be aware of or to know inwardly. Okay? So you look inward at yourself and you develop a knowingness about this inner self. That is self-consciousness. The advent of logical thinking cannot be understated. So we're going to hang on this really deeply here. Around age 7, as we've said, children shift from magical thinking to logical thinking. At this age, a child gains the ability to categorize things as right or wrong, begins to internalize moral judgments about themselves, becomes more self-conscious, no longer as just experiencing life, but is evaluating themselves, and develops episodic memory, like we've said. So if a defining event happens around this age 7, the child has the cognitive ability to analyze it, but lacks the emotional tools to process it correctly. The shift from magical thinking to logical thinking is not just cognitive, it's existential. It's the moment we awaken to our own fallibility, responsibility, and the weight of our moral choices. Whether viewed through psychological, spiritual, or developmental lenses, this transformation is a defining moment in what we say it means to be human. So let's walk through that specifically. Let's talk about logical deduction, okay? How we begin to think about something that happens. So at this age, it's not just about what happens, it's about the meaning that a child assigns to whatever it is that's happened. So here's how that type of logic and logical deduction might work. Let's say that they spill water, a child spills water on the floor, and their parent yells at them, or worse, abandons them or abuses them. That's like the long-term tail on that. But let's just say that their parent has yelled at them. Now, logical deduction at age 7 is something bad has happened. Further on, bad things happen to bad people. The next step is, if I were good, this wouldn't have happened. After that comes, that must mean I'm bad. And the phase after that is not just bad, I am evil, broken, and unworthy. It's a super profound, self-reflexive, inwardly knowing with a very underformed brain of who you are at the core. This is how that happens. At this stage, a child can't say through logic, hey, listen, my mom's not feeling well. There's something in the circumstance that caused this to happen. The counter's uneven in this part, and I just put the glass down and it tipped over. It's not a big deal. The counter's uneven. It has nothing to do with me at the core. Maybe I'm loved despite this. Even if mom yelled at me, I'm loved anyway. She's just having a moment. A child at 7 can't think that. They develop self-consciousness and logical thinking, so their logical thinking always leads them inside to themselves, inside of themselves, inward knowing. So instead of processing through, no big deal logic, they personalize it and create an identity based on judgment. So now we have shame plus logic equals a false identity. And this false identity can stay buried for years, shaping how someone sees themselves well into adulthood. There is a difference between bad and evil, okay? There's a big difference. When a child in the pre-operational stage, let's say between 3 and 6 years old, if they spill their juice and they get yelled at because of it, they'll say things like, I'm bad because I made a mess. If I try harder, I can be good again. If I hold my sippy cup with 2 hands, I can be good, right? The bad event was that the juice spilled, and I'm bad because I maybe didn't hold my cup right. The concrete operational stage, if a child is blamed for something even as big as, let's say, their parents' divorce, they will say to themselves, I'm evil because I ruin things. I, as a person, internally, my inward knowingness about myself, I ruin things. That's who I am. I am a ruiner of things. Which means there's nothing I can do to fix this. I'm broken. At the very core of my being, I'm broken because I ruin things. I am a ruiner of things. That is my identity. In the pre-operational stage, the I am bad is made because I got punished for breaking some type of rule. The badness is external and can be corrected if my behavior is corrected. In the concrete operational stage, the sense of I am evil and unworthy can't be fixed. This internalized shame makes a child believe that they are fundamentally broken. And this shift is devastating because bad is fixable, evil is not. Bad is about actions. Evil is about identity. And once evil and shame becomes an identity, the child no longer sees a way back to goodness. Here's the deal. You came by it honestly. You came by it honestly. Listen, none of this stuff comes from nothing. When I say, let's not talk about it like trauma, it's not because trauma didn't happen. Trauma did happen. Traumatic things have happened. The issue is that it developed within you into something that is a false identity. And that's the issue. So if you feel broken, it's because you don't feel like you work right. You feel like profoundly you're defective. But it developed out of something. You had an unmet need, or there was a betrayal, or there was an emotional wound. That happened. And consequently, you caused this wound within yourself out of logical deduction in a 7-year-old mind. This is understandable. There is no blame here for a schism in identity. All of this is understandable. I want to walk you through my schism in identity. And before I do, I want to say there has been nothing in my life more clarifying than the understanding that I had taken an experience in my life and turned it into a foundational belief about who I was at the core. That belief buried itself into my subconsciousness and spread necrotically over my life experience, driving all my decisions and all my behaviors until the belief became the entire manifestation of my life. Like a seismic event, it ripped apart the landmass of my identity and opened up a chasm I could not straddle. And I fell into an abyss of darkness and isolation, and I remained inside this fissure for 40 years. If that is where you are, 2 things I want you to know. I personally know what that's like to be in that chasm of darkness and isolation. And I also know 100% there's a way out. I'm going to talk to you about the fall and the funk. When I was 7 years old and I was holding my baby brother, I fell out of a 2-story window and hit my head on the attic stairs below. My brother bounced on my stomach and was totally fine, but I was not. I had suffered traumatic brain injury, but at that time, we didn't know as much about traumatic brain injury as we do now. So I spent the night in the hospital, but was released the next morning, and everyone said I was fine, and I wasn't. And from that moment forward, I began waking up in the middle of the night with all of these symptoms that happen within traumatic brain injury. And I would run into my parents' bedroom saying, I'm sick, I'm unwell. And my mom and I would run into the bathroom, and I would have these episodes night after night after night after night. I was taken to doctors, and doctors all pronounced me fine. So over the course of time, when no one could really identify what was happening and didn't find anything wrong with me, after days and weeks and months and years of this, that I was consistently pronounced fine by the medical industry, the adults in my life at that time started asking if there was something else wrong with me. Like maybe I was jealous of my baby brother. Maybe I had some type of overly dramatic personality. And some of the questions that were being asked on the external, I began internalizing. And I said to myself, what kind of person is jealous of her baby brother? Something must be wrong with me. What type of person would do that? And in my self-consciousness, I turned what was happening externally, I turned it inward, and I started to know about myself that something was profoundly wrong at the core. At that same time, my dad got me this little case. It's a United States proof set of minted coins in a red velvet case, and it has a shiny penny and a nickel and a dime and a quarter and a 50-cent piece and a full silver dollar. And he was teaching me about the value of money, and he gave this to me. And somehow in my 7-year-old mind, I said to myself, I'm 50 cents on the dollar. Because I'm unworthy and less than and broken, and something is profoundly wrong with me at the core, I'm 50 cents. Everyone else is a full dollar, and I'm 50 cents. And that singular belief translated into behaviors. Those behaviors created a life and a lifestyle in which I thought I was unworthy and broken, and I attracted people and experiences to me and myself and my life that substantiated that belief, where I could say to myself, oh, of course, this is my boyfriend because I'm only 50 cents. Oh, of course, this is my experience at work. I'm only 50 cents. And I hustled to make up the difference between that 50 cents and the full dollar. I tried to prove myself worthy. I tried to prove myself valuable to people and those around me who I saw everyone else as a full dollar. So my internalized belief, what I have come to call my 50-cent belief, was that I am broken, I am less than, something is profoundly wrong with me. That's a 50-cent belief. From that belief, it generated 50-cent behaviors, which looks like, because I am broken and unworthy and less than, I must X in order to Y. I must hustle for worthiness in order to keep this job. I must show this person how wonderful I am and be really crazy wonderful to this person so that they don't leave me. This is a 50-cent behavior. It's a proof-based behavior. I have to show you proof of my worthiness, and I have to behave in a way that is at a level of perfection such that I can show myself and you that I am worthy, that I am actually a full dollar, but internally I believe that I'm only 50 cents. So an internalized 50-cent belief of I am broken, I am less than, generated 50-cent behaviors that said, therefore I must X in order to Y. And the whole package of the event and the belief and the behaviors created what I call 50-cent thinking. And that packages the whole story together through the logical deduction of a child. And yet those 50-cent beliefs and 50-cent behaviors root themselves into our subconscious and into our body. Remember, we talked about they embed themselves in our bodies. And even though I aged out of 7 years old to 8, 9, 10, 11, that 50-cent belief created a schism in my identity. Through the fall and what I call the funk, this fall that happened generated 50-cent beliefs, behaviors, and 50-cent thinking that colored the rest of my life. If you feel like 50 cents on the dollar, this is what you're actually saying about yourself. That I am worth a percentage of the original price or value. So if a human is worth a full dollar, I am only worth a percentage of that because I am less than. It also means selling an asset at a significantly lower price than its true value. You have value. You have inherent value. And if you have 50-cent beliefs and behaviors, you have been selling your asset, your human asset, your humanity at a significantly lower price. The phrase is also often used in association with a distress sale or a bank-held property. And why that's important as a definition and as it relates to you is you see yourself as a distress sale. A distress sale is, I have to sell this. Like, I have to get rid of this and offload this right now. And so you hustle for worthiness and you show your neediness to everyone because you're under stress. It's a stress sale. Someone has to buy you and purchase you at a value, and you want to get rid of it as fast as you humanly can. And a bank-held property means that you don't hold the value of yourself within yourself. You give it to everyone else. The world is your bank, and they hold the property, and they want to get rid of it as fast as they can. That is cents on the dollar. There is a story in the Bible called the fall in the Garden of Eden. It is how the Bible begins. In the creation of the earth, male and female were created, and in that process, they also had a fall. And there is an interesting parallel that I found between childhood development and the fall in the Garden of Eden. Both represented a loss of innocence, the acquisition of self-awareness, and the resulting loss of freedom of being. I want to talk about, I'm going to read this to you, but I want to talk about really quickly a definition of the word sin. You know, we often talk about the story of Adam and Eve and the fall, capital T, capital F. In the same way, the fall defined my life. The fall also defined humanity. And we talk about this story, or how we name this story is we call it the original sin. And for those of you who aren't Christian, you still probably know the story of Adam and Eve and the garden and the apple and the serpent, right? This is lore and legend among people who even don't see it as the true story of what occurred in the Garden of Eden. You still know about this story, the fall, the original sin. And sin is to miss the mark. It's an archery term. It means to miss the mark. We talked previously about this idea of being a little bit knocked out of alignment, and this knocking out of alignment taken over a large swath of time misses the mark. If you shoot an arrow toward a bullseye and you're a little bit off, by the time it leaves the bow and hits the target, it's way off. It may just be a little bit off in your hands, but by the time it reaches its destination, it's way off target. That is an idea of sin. It's also from the Proto-German Sünde, which means something that should not be, or a true crime. So sin is a true crime. It's a true crime in your life that you've missed the mark of who you were intended to be. And I want to talk to you about what that looks like from a biblical perspective. We're going to read just a real short piece. This is from Genesis 2:25, and we're going to go through Genesis 3:11. Okay, so go with me on this. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed or embarrassed. So God created man and woman, and they were both in the garden, and they were naked and not ashamed or embarrassed. Chapter number 3. Now the serpent was more crafty from any of the living creatures in the field which the Lord God had made. And the serpent said to the woman, can it really be that God has said, you shall not eat from the tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden, except from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden. God said, you shall not eat from it, nor touch it, otherwise you will die. But the serpent said to the woman, you certainly will not die. For God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delightful to look at, and that the tree was to be desired in order to make one wise and insightful, she took some of its fruit and ate it, and she also gave some of it to her husband with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of the two of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they fastened fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And then they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. So the man and his wife hid and kept themselves hidden from the presence of the Lord God among the trees in the garden. But the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, where are you? Adam said, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid myself. And God said, who told you that you were naked? I find this to be the most profound story as I was looking at trauma and a schism in identity, because this is the first recorded moment of self-consciousness and shame in human history. Adam now sees himself through a lens of judgment, whereas before he just existed in a state of pure being. So often there's this idea that God, people say, so this tree is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, okay? So the original sin is that Eve ate fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And some people often say, well, what kind of a God would not want you to know things? What kind of a God would not want you to have knowledge? And here's the thing, God's command to Adam and Eve about the tree wasn't about withholding something good. Knowledge is good. It wasn't about withholding something good. It was about protecting them from a burden they were not equipped to carry and to keep them from becoming something they were never intended to be. The truth about a schism in identity is that you are carrying a burden you are not equipped to carry. It is beyond your ability to cope, but it can be redeemed. Number 2, your perception of yourself is out of alignment, and over time, you will and have missed the mark and become someone drastically different than who you were designed to be. And number 3, the truth about a schism in identity is this is tantamount to a loss of being. It should not be. It is a crime. I'm going to say those again. You're carrying a burden you were not equipped to carry. It is beyond your ability to cope, but it can be redeemed. Your perception of yourself is out of alignment, and over time, you have or will miss the mark and become someone drastically different than who you were designed to be. This schism in identity is tantamount to a loss of being. It should not be. It is a crime. Going forward, I want you to stop looking at what happened in your life as trauma, but rather see it as a schism in your identity. Trauma is fixed and unchangeable. A schism can be healed and sealed from the core, and it can be redeemed. Begin to assess the event, whatever traumatic event that you have talked about. Begin to see and assess that event and your identity separately. Whatever happened, happened. It's a part of your history, but it is not your identity. Be open to deducing things differently. You are no longer that 7-year-old child with an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. You are an adult. Step from self-consciousness to self-awareness and commit to the journey. If you have the From the Core workbook, I want you to open up now to pages 49 and 51 and answer these questions. And if you do not have the workbook, answer these questions in a journal or in the comments below. Have you ever felt like 50 cents on the dollar? Have you ever felt like 50 cents on the dollar? Is there a moment in your life where you went from feeling whole to feeling broken and unworthy and less than? And lastly, I want you to write about how this schism in your identity affected your life. If I know one thing from going through this journey myself, it's that you have a full dollar identity by design. You are a full dollar. And if no one has ever told that to you about yourself, that ends now. Your identity, this schism in identity of this 50-cent belief is recoverable. I know this firsthand because I recovered mine. Broken Canvas is up next. Do not get off this momentum. We are going to find out who you are at the core. Stick with me. Stay with me. Until next time.